When I found out that Wings of Starlight, a prequel story to the Tinkerbell franchise, focusing on the love story between Clarion and Mallory, was out, I was really excited. I'm a fan of the Tinkerbell franchise. The original movie was one I watched continuously as a child. I even did a little marathon of all the movies this year. And in my youth, I read a lot of the Disney Fairies books. I'm not sure if anybody remembers them. So I finally got around to reading this masterpiece, and I absolutely loved it. So I'm gonna give you all of my thoughts and feelings about the book. So, in case you need a refresher as to how this story ties into the whole Tinkerbell franchise, allow me to explain. The Tinkerbell franchise primarily takes place in Pixie Hollow, which is where Tinkerbell lives, and it is ruled by Queen Clarion, who is a supporting character, and she's in almost all of the movies. And in the fourth film, Secret of the Wings, we find out that she was in love, and is still in love with Malloy, who is the Lord of the Winter Woods. However, after he broke his wing, they realized they could not be together due to the seasonal differences. She is from the warm seasons, he is from winter, and it is not safe for fairies to pass over into other realms because the temperature differences can break their wings, and there's no known cure for a broken wing. You might also wonder, how familiar do I need to be with the Tinkerbell franchise? How fresh in my memory do I need this in order to understand and enjoy it? And I would say, honestly, you could easily go into this book without watching any of the Tinkerbell movies recently or ever. Clarion and Mallory are the only two characters that appear in the films. It's because the story takes place it starts about 1 month before Clarion's coronation. She's still a princess, queen in training, and that is many years before the first Tinkerbell movie starts, which I think really helps the story. It makes it stand on its own better, and it doesn't feel like it's cashing in as much, pandering to fan service. So I think that it definitely helped me enjoy the book more. It wasn't just an I Spy game of, remember this in the first movie? Or remember this in Secret of the Wings? I think you get that feeling a little bit, but it never feels forced or overdone. So now that we dived into how the story fits into the whole world of Tinkerbell, and let's dive into the story itself a little bit deeper, and specifically with Clarion. As previously mentioned, Clarion is a noble character throughout the movie series, but we don't get too much of her. She's always a noble supporting character. And something else that makes this interesting is what we really know from the movies is in Secret of the Wings, you have Clarion and Mallory telling a little bit of their story to Tinkerbell and Periwinkle respectively as to why fairies are not allowed to go into the other realms. However, there is a little bit of an unreliable narrator to them telling the story because they never specifically state it was them, and there aren't too many details. So going in where we get to see more of it is really interesting. And then as for Clarion, she still feels familiar to who she was in the movies, being very graceful, elegant, but also very kind. She feels a little bit more like a teenager in this. She's unsure of herself, and we do see her a little bit of a rebellious nature. But what stands out about her is her kindness. At the beginning, she saves a bee, specifically thinking, if I'm to be queen, I need to look out even for the smallest subjects. And she is continuously kind throughout this story. She's willing to go into the winter woods, not just out of curiosity, but when the nightmare monsters are constantly fighting and coming through, attacking, she realizes, I have to go in there. I can help. I'm the future queen. I can't just stand back. She even says at one point, what good is it being queen if you can't do anything about what's going on? At the same time, though, her kindness is also a little bit of her greatest weakness in the story. I won't go into too much detail, but I think in a world where a lot of young adult novels don't, like, we have kind protagonists, but I feel as though we don't get too many protagonists where it's clear that their kindness is both their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. So that's what I really loved about Clarion in the book. Something else about Clarion's character that I really liked, especially after finishing the book and thinking a little bit more, is there is some Tinkerbellness to her, but it doesn't feel, you never really think about that too much. Specifically in almost all the Tinkerbell movies, at the start, Tink sees a rule, but she's very curious. She ends up rebelling, and then she kind of resets the status quo a little bit and shows maybe there's another way about seeing this. And then similarly with Clarion, at the beginning, when she's being told about winter, it's seen as more dangerous. You should stay off. Elvina, who is the current queen of Pixie Hollow, tells her that she's willing to cut off, like block off the barrier so that the monsters of the story, the nightmares, cannot escape into the warm realms. They will let the winter fairies fend for themselves. And Clarion is very upset about this later, and she thinks, no, the winter fairies are still our people. We can't do this. And she's also very curious. When she sees Mallory for the first time, she's drawn to him for two reasons: how he is different from her, but also how he is alike to her, because she doesn't know what to expect. And that's something I loved about the romance in this story. Specifically, Clarion is a governing talent fairy. She was born from a falling star, and that is why she is going to be the queen. However, she is one of, if not the only, governing talent in her realm, and because of that, she feels very lonely. And when she meets Mallory, who is currently the warden of the Winter Woods, he's in a similar position to her where he is in charge of the woods, but he can't fit in as easily. And they both feel very responsible for their people and why they must protect them, which I think makes them a really good match. And then at the same time, when Clarion enters winter, it's a bit different from the warm weathers because she's never experienced it before, and she's drawn to them not just because of Mallory, but the atmosphere itself. So at the end, she's not just thinking of Mallory when she's making these big decisions. She is thinking about winter and all who live there. And then we get to the emotional part of the story. Specifically, walking in, we all knew that this wasn't going to end like with a traditional happily ever after at all, because we know where Clarion and Mallory are at the start of Secret of the Wings. They are living in their own realms and they are unallowed to be together. But even before that idea sets in, you really get to see two fairies in love. They are willing to not worry about the rules, and you have these moments when they're just like holding hands, snuggling. And Mallory also says "as you wish" a couple of times, which, as a Princess Bride fan. And then at the end, I'm not gonna go into spoilers, but I was blinking my eyes so rapidly. Thankfully for me, no tears were coming out because I didn't want my dad to come in and see me crying over a book. But I Googled quickly, what is the record for most amount of blinks in a single minute? And could this book potentially help me break that record? And also, there were a couple of times when I had to grab a stuffed animal because my little heart was like, oh, it's beautiful and tragic. And I don't know if it's just nostalgia talking, but It was amazing. It's wonderful. So, yeah, if you couldn't tell, I absolutely love this book. It is a must-read for anybody who grew up with the Tinkerbell franchise or still loves the Tinkerbell movies, books, whatever. But also, even if you've never read any of the Disney Fairy books, watched any of the Tinkerbell movies, and you just want a story about fairies, I highly recommend it. I think you'll have a good time. It'll pull at your heartstrings, and you'll feel strong emotions, which I enjoy feeling sometimes, even if they're not the prettiest. So, in case you'll be wondering where I'll probably be in the corner rewatching Secret of the Wings. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with your friends. I'm Louisa Hammond, and I'll see you next time.